Name's Daniel, then go by the nickname of Rambo. I got started in this because I used to do it as a youth when I was a kid, and then just through the progress of life kind of fell out of it. Had my own kids, they started getting into it. Coming from the Bay Area where I'm from, there was always a ton of tracks available, and for the first 10 years or so, I didn't even know we had a BMX track here, and I accidentally found it one day and asked the kids, my daughter, if she wanted to try it, and she was like, yeah, let's go try it. We bought her a $20 bike at Walmart and came out here. She fell in love with it, and that progressed into what she does now, and now she's a 18 expert. We did the state circuit and everything else, but I mean, due to COVID and everything, obviously we kind of took a step back, and now everybody's getting back into it. I run a team. I run Chaos NorCal. We are a factory team, but our end of it is just grassroots. At one point in time before COVID, we had about 13 kids that rode for us. Now I'm back down to just my nieces and nephews, and we're slowly picking the traction back up. Now that the track's going and everything's going good. But yeah, I come out here and I help do a lot of the weed whacking and just kind of keeping the track presentable and making it look nice to come out and ride and look inviting, and just kind of keeps it neat, keeps it clean, keeps the ticks down during the tick season. You know, you help out wherever else you can, running as a track official and making sure that we actually have enough officials to race, working on the actual track itself with the track operator and the rest of the board, the rider reps, and kind of seeing what we need and, you know, what needs to be worked on more, what needs to be worked on a little bit less. Getting ready to do our track rebuild here soon, so that's gonna take a little bit. It takes a lot of heavy equipment, it's a lot of dirt moving, it's no longer things you can do by hand. For me, man, it's about the kids, about seeing them happy. I mean, not everybody thrives in like a team sport. Your team's success isn't dependent on the entire team, what the team does. You have riders of all different calibers. You have riders that are just starting, that aren't as good, that don't push as hard, and that's fine for them. But it helps to have that little bit of guidance and a little bit of the team structure, so they don't just kind of go off on their own. And for us as a grassroots team, if you want to get onto like a factory team or a national team, there is a lot of things that you have to do when you sign that contract. You got to travel and do so. They want to see you do so many nationals. They want to see you podium in so many national, state races and stuff like that. And like that stuff's expensive. I mean, getting bikes, all the travel, that stuff gets expensive. But I mean, relatively, this sport is inexpensive to get into versus like football, right? Football, soccer, all those other team sports. Like, you have to pay for those uniforms. You don't keep them. They go to somebody else when you're done. So it's like you're paying for everybody else to go out and have fun. And like, you only run like a half a season with football unless you're making, you know, playoffs and everything else. We're here, if it's raining here, it might not be in SoCal, and you can go down, you can go race SoCal, and you get to travel, and you get to go see a bunch of cool stuff, and you meet a ton of lifelong friends here. We've still got friends that we made, you know, 11, 12 years ago now, that we still keep in contact with. You know, all of our kids are getting back into racing, and now they've gone from these little kids to now they're all like 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, still doing it. Some of them have kids of their own. Now they're bringing their kids out to the track, and like the progression of it, because we can start our riders so young at 2 years old on Striders, and we have riders clear up into their 80s that do this sport. So I mean, it's cool, and you can do it where like an entire family races. We have moms that race their kids. We have kids that race their brothers, their sisters. They're like, my daughter races her cousins because they're all the two of them are relatively in the same age group. It's fun for them. It's kind of a camaraderie and a bragging right between the two of them. They can go back and forth, and the other kids, you know, they're all bringing their little sister into it now. And it's a way to kind of keep kids from kind of getting out in trouble. And like I said, man, it's a sport you can do all year long. You can do this all year long. It's not seasonal based. Your track may be seasonal based, but everywhere else you go isn't seasonal. And now, recently, over the last couple of years, BMX racing has become an Olympic sport. So you can take it that far if you choose to. I mean, that's on the rider. Every kid learns a little different. What works for one kid, the other kid may not absorb so much. So it's a lot of catering to the different styles of the child to get the same overall goals, to push them to be the best version of themselves that they can, or at least that you believe that they can. You know, and they may not realize that they're able to achieve that kind of success, and you find that like some of them can want to give up on themselves. They get defeated if they don't win so many races. They're like, man, I'm not very good at this, I'm not this. And then you kind of start working with them and chipping away at all these little pieces that it takes, you know, from changing a gear ratio for them, or like, you know, hey, bring your elbows out a little bit more in a turn, or, you know, you got to stand up a little bit straighter on the gate, doing different gate practices, going and working little things like like pump tracks are huge in this sport. Our pump tracks up here are just starting to gain momentum, but like down in places like Manteca and places like that, they've got giant pump tracks as they realized it was fun and it had a need. So we're starting to get a couple of them up here, and they're huge for like learning how to work the rhythm section and get faster. You work those, you gain faster, and it's kind of a safe place for the little ones to learn versus getting on a giant track like this. The big thing that scares these kids when they get out here is they look at that giant start hill and they're like, wow, man, that's really high up there. A lot of them are afraid of the noise from the gate. Like they look at the obstacles and they're like, I can't get over that, I can't get over that. And through you kind of push them and you section out this track a little bit, and you're like, all right, we'll try this part, we'll try this part, we'll try this part. Some of them are like, I don't want to do that part, I want to do that part. And you go, okay, we'll try that one, or we'll try this one. But then when it clicks into them and they get it, man, watching that excitement for them that, hey, I did this. I was scared, but I did it. I got it. I did it. And then before you know it, it starts off just working one straight and a turn, and then a second straight and a turn, and then another turn. Before you know it, you can't stop them. They jump up on that gate and they just go, and they keep going and keep going and keep going. And it's awesome to watch, man. It's fulfilling. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I would have. I would have still kept just doing it, at least keeping up basic skills. I think I left BMX when I was like 17, 18 when I had my first kid. You know, my first kid was on the way at 18, and so I was like, oh man, like I don't have time to ride anymore. Now it's time to go back to work, and it's time to, you know, you got to start doing all these things. But I definitely would have kept riding just to keep up that rider skill. You don't necessarily lose it. It takes a while to gain the momentum back. But you know, then as an adult versus as a child, you're looking at it and you're like, oh man, like what happens if I crash? And that's always a big thing. It's always a big thing in your mind. So what happens if I crash? It's like, then it's no longer as a child. You're not like, oh, I crashed, I'm hurt. Now it's like, oh crap, I'm hurt, I can't go to work, bills can't be paid, things like that. For me, yeah, I definitely would have kept it going. I don't think I would have kept doing the crazy stuff I was doing when I was younger, but I mean, I wasn't huge into racing. I did race. I started racing down at Santa Clara Powell, but mostly I got into freestyle riding, and that's a different entity of BMX on its own. But a lot of the fundamentals and everything still transfer over to here. So if you could do that, you can do both of these things. And now even freestyle BMX is an Olympic sport. So it's crazy how much you look back and you're like, man, what if I had made that my career choice? You know what I mean? And would I still have as much fun doing it, knowing how much I have to dedicate into it to be at that competitive level? You know, it was the risk worth the gain. And sometimes it's not even about that gain. It's about just coming out here and having fun. You can let these frustrations down on the track. You can ride fun. You can laugh with all your buddies about it. I mean, it's too much fun to let it go. So I don't think I'll ever let it go. I think I'll be one of those riders that kind of still might jump on the bike every now and then and keep going into the 80s. Will I probably go out and compete as hard as I used to? Not really. For me, it's more so about letting these kids compete. But it's hard to get them to want to stay and compete if you're not still somewhat riding a bike. You know what I mean? So I still have my bike. I still do come out here. I still ride. But most of the time, it's like, I know where I'm needed. I'm needed as a track official. I'm needed as a coach. I'm needed as a groundskeeper and do those things. And so for me, if I can keep this track to where it needs to be, to where we can get these kids to keep riding, then absolutely. I think it's huge too that the kids actually learn how to work on the track too, because they're the ones that ride it. So it's like if they feel that a certain obstacle is, you know, like in really bad shape, you know, hopefully they're like, man, hey, you know, that double on the first straight, that thing is really rough. Like, you know, is there a way to smooth it out? And so you teach them how to do it, and then as us that are older coming out of this, they're stepping up and following into that. And so then that's what's going to keep this sport going. Absolutely. And we have that. I mean, we have one of our kids on our team. His dad rides with him. His dad races too. And we have two of those. My nephew, his dad comes out here and rides too. So it's definitely something you guys can do together, because I mean, throwing a ball is one thing with your kid and those things, but your mom or your dad or your cousin isn't out there on that field competing with you, right? They're usually cheering you on from the sidelines. We're out here, yes, to a certain extent they're cheering you on the sidelines, but for the most part they're out there riding with you, except for in your race, because you're grouped by class. The other thing in BMX is there is not a bench to be seen except for the ones that the fans and the supporters sit on. You're never going to ride the bench because you're not as good of a player or you're not needed for that. Even when you're in between motos, you're up there, you're sitting there, you're watching it all, you're rooting on your teammates, you're rooting on your friends, your cousins, your relatives, you're back in staging doing all of that. And even when you don't make your moto, you're sitting over there rooting on your teammates, knowing that you're going to be up on the next moto. So there is no really like sitting out in this sport. And when all the motors are done and everyone takes their break, you're right back out on the track if you want to, and you can come out and keep riding. So where you can't go out on the field in football and just keep practicing. Yeah. You know, once that intermission is done, everybody heads back to the locker room, and you know, you talk about what you did wrong and what you need to be better at, and then, you know, I tend to see in those sports like that, you got a coach that's grilling you rather than trying to elevate you. I mean, his overall job is to try to elevate you, but there has to be a certain level of toughness with that so that the football players will understand. So it can come off like it's a little condescending at a kid. You know what I mean? Oh, you failed this play because you didn't make that. Here, the kids know what they've done. They know what they need to work on. They figure it out really fast. And that's the thing, is you don't need another teammate to help you work on it. You just come out here and work on it. That's it. You know, it becomes you, the bike, and that track. That's it. You don't have to rely on those teammates. So if you're not a team sport kind of kid, you really don't need to worry because you can do this solo if you choose. Our technology boom caught up with us. I think we outgrew our technological base. It's easier to sit at home in an air-conditioned room and play an Xbox, right? It's easier to do that things. It's this day and age, in a large part to COVID and things like that. A lot of kids that are growing up that are now becoming in these age brackets, they don't possess the social skill as much to go out. So, do I think the sport of BMX will die? No, I don't think it ever will. Just like everything else, it goes through its ups and downs, and it has like where rider count is. As far as the location of our track here, who knows? I don't know. I mean, you're as a track, you always try to have like where you want to get to be to a point where you can have that national race, or you can have those big state races and stuff like that. And our track is on the smaller end. It is, but we make it work for us. You know, we got a pretty dedicated group of riders that comes out here. We're always trying to boost the rider count, but sometimes it works and sometimes it don't. You just, you know, if it doesn't work, and sometimes kids just don't want to do it, man. The big thing with kids is they're afraid to get hurt. It's scary. It's scary to get hurt. When you're a kid, you get stung by a bee, it's the worst thing ever, right? You get stung by a bee as an adult and you're like, that's not that bad. Yeah, it hurts. I mean, unless you're allergic to it, then that sucks all around. But for the most part, and that's the same thing. Like, if you fall out here, you're like, oh man, that's gonna suck to fall. Our dirt isn't soft. Our dirt is packed in, so it hurts when you do fall, but you have all those levels of protection. How far you take that protection level is kind of up to you. Out here we mandate long sleeve shirts and a helmet and closed-toed shoes. But I mean, that's all you have to have. I mean, you can get gloves, you can get chest protectors, you can get other jerseys, you can get other clothes, you can get like thicker pants and stuff. It's kind of all. We got a guy out here rides in full hockey gear underneath his uniform. So, and he hasn't really been hurt too bad. So you have to have a bike, no training wheels and no pegs, no kickstand, no reflectors. Just because those things, when they fall off, they tend to get broken on the track, and if you fall, those things tend to gouge up the track pretty well. Where you're on paved tracks, not such a big deal. But when you're on stuff like dirt, you take giant chunks out if your rider crashes with pegs, and it's a lot of man hours to rebuild that and then smooth that back out and get it to where it needs to be. Long sleeve shirt, helmet, pants, closed-toed shoes are a huge one. So don't show up in flip-flops and think you're gonna ride or race. You have to have a helmet. I recommend full face helmets just because that's the maximum amount of protection you can get. They do sell light full face helmets that are specific to BMX or motocross, and most of the full face helmets are DOT compliant anyway. So if you ride dirt bikes, your full face helmets will transfer right over. The motorcycle helmets are a little bit heavy. You can wear them. if that's all you've got, you can wear that. Gloves to protect your hands just in case you do fall, but it's not, like I said, that's not mandatory. What is mandatory is the helmet, the long sleeve shirt, and the closed-toed shoes and pants. We have riders that ride in shorts, but they put shin guards on. So if you're a shorts person, just get a set of shin guards, or at least a set of knee pads. I mean, most of it's just all about protection. Every inch of skin you can cover is better for the fall. Our track does do a loaner program where we have loaner bikes that you can rent, so you can rent helmet and loaner bike. It's a different charge. Every track charges something different, and to be able to do that. And just overall, just a good attitude, man. I mean, we don't like a lot of nonsense. You know, there's not a lot of negativity between riders, and you leave it all here. If you do have an issue with another rider, you know, you leave it here on this track. It doesn't ever follow. And that's another thing that I notice about this sport a lot, where that doesn't happen in football. Like, you know, you have this huge rivalry. Oh, I can't stand that team. This is our division rival. This is that. There isn't any of that here. You know, I mean, you're all hoping for each other's success. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. Nobody wants to see anybody have a downfall. So that's a huge thing too. Strider riders start at 2 years old. We do have a Strider class here. It's a small Strider class for our track. Like I said, our rider count is kind of on the smaller end right now. But we start them all the way at 2 years old on Strider bikes, and then eventually they have to move up. You always try to get them to move up. Some of our 3-year-olds are like, a couple years ago we had a 3-year-old that was already on a pedal bike and already he was off and running. Some kids take to it better than others. So your Strider rider may start at 2 and not come off that bike and off that Strider until he's 6, because you just can't get him there. Some reason you can't get him there. And then each group is grouped by an age and a class. So you may be like, so we have 5 and under novice is where it starts out at, and then it continues to go. You could be an 80-year-old novice if you choose to. And so to move from novice to intermediate, you have to have 10 first place wins. And that's not first place laps, that's overall. So you have 3 motos overall. So each 3 motos, so when that race is done, it has to be 3 main event first place finishes. And I think to go from like intermediate to expert is like 30 wins is what it is. So, and they don't have to be done at different tracks. They can all be done at your home track. So if you don't ever travel and you just want to race here and you don't want to go ride anywhere else, then you take your 10 wins here, take your 30 wins here, and be done with it that way. But the more you travel and the more tracks you go to, the better chance you have. And then for girls, they can either go novice, intermediate, expert, or they can go girl class, and then it's girl novice, girl intermediate, girl expert. And they're only racing girls in their age bracket and group.
But they can race. They can race.
Yep, if you choose to, you can have them race intermingled as well. And then you have, like at state races and the national events, you have what's called a mixed open, where you can ride either a 24-inch or you can ride a class bike. And that's the other thing too, is like, you get a lot of kids that will do what's called double classing. So your standard BMX bike is 20-inch wheelbase, right? So they're 20-inch round wheels. Then they go all different other sides, like 20 by inch and an eighth, 20 by inch and 3/8, 20 by 1.5, and then 20 by 1.75, 20 by 1.25, and so far and so on. And then once you get into the 24-inch wheelbase, which is smaller mountain bike styles, then it's the same thing. You can go 24 by inch and an eighth, 24 by inch and 3/8. The inch and an eighth and inch and 3/8 are usually your riders that are up to like 8 years old, 9 years old, and then you start switching into either the 1.5s or the 1.75s, because that's what those weight ratings on those tires will hold. Unless your child's like a small framed kid. If your child's a small framed kid, they may ride inch and 3/8 tires all the way until they're adults. It just kind of depends. State qualifier race, it happened to us. We had a rider at Boomtown, which is the track over in Reading. We had just met this family, didn't know them at all. They were from Oroville or somewhere by there, And we had just met them at that state qualifier. We didn't know anything about them. One of the kids was racing in, I want to say it was like 13I, which is 13 intermediate. And his little brother was racing and his little sister was racing. And he ended up getting hurt. He came over the first turn and ended up breaking his collarbone in the first turn. And the mom and dad had to figure out, oh crap, like who's gonna stay here with the other kids that have to race, and who's gonna end up going with, you know, the child that got hurt to the hospital so they can go. And my sister and my wife and everybody, we told them, we're like, hey, look, we're not going anywhere. That's important for you guys. So why don't you guys both go with your child to the hospital? We'll stay here with your kids and let them race. We'll keep an eye on them. We'll make sure they're fed. We'll make sure nothing happens to them. And that developed into quite a big friendship for my oldest daughter, who doesn't even race. She doesn't ride bikes. She's not a bike kid. But her and the older brother actually hit it off and talked for free. They still talk now, and they've moved up. That whole family's moved over like the Eastern Seaboard. They had to pack up and leave, and they moved to Pennsylvania. But it was the fact that like a random stranger that you met at that race entrusted you enough to watch their prized possession. There was never a question asked. It wasn't like, hey, you're not gonna run off with my kids, are you? It was just like, okay, thank you for that. And then everything got mitigated, taken care of. The kid went to the hospital, came back, and everybody just invoked our tip up and hung out that whole weekend. And we're all still great friends. We still talk all the time. And come to find out that like through all of that, she was actually a lady who's did the BMX Moms t-shirts. She was the one that made BMX Moms t-shirts and stuff. And yeah, her son's still riding. Both of her kids are still riding. They just do it on the East Coast now, and all of our kids still talk. And it was crazy to me, like, because where I grew up, you would have never trusted somebody like that with your kids. It would have never happened. Even in football, you wouldn't leave your. I mean, we had their infant child. Wasn't even on a bicycle. I think the little baby was like a year old maybe. And we had the middle son who was like 9 or 10, and they chilled out with us while mom and dad went to the hospital and everything. And then afterwards, everybody came over to our hotel, and you know, we let the kids take off and go swimming, and everybody just chit-chatted and talked, and they were super appreciative of it. And they were just like we didn't do it for any gain on ours, except for the fact that like we're parents, you know, we're parents, we're team managers, we're coaches, so like we understand the importance of, that's a lot of money and a lot of travel to throw into a weekend to have your whole weekend get blown because the one kid got hurt, so now the other one is out and doesn't get to continue, or just having to take mom, dad, all those kids into a hospital, into an area that you're not from and you're foreign to. So if you've ever been to a hospital waiting room, they're not fun. They suck. You know, so the kids still got to have fun, even though they were worried about their brother. You know, they in between motos, they would talk on the phone, and everything was mitigated, taken care of. And like I said, it's one of those situations where that's a lifelong friend. You know, it's a lifelong friend, and maybe potentially just a new family member. You know, because you invite them into your team and everything, and everybody you meet out here at these tracks, they become like, we're like one big family, really. And I really don't see that in many other sports. I really don't. And I played football, I played soccer as a youth, and I don't ever remember it ever being like that. It was always, you know, each parent was to their own. They were there for their own kid, and that's it. Here, they're for everybody. Like the younger riders, everybody's like, yeah, you know, go so-and-so, go. And they're like, oh, dude, that was awesome, buddy. It was awesome. You did it. You know, and they're, oh, hey, man, that was a really good race. That was a really good race. You know, that looked really good. I don't think I've ever seen much of that anywhere else. It's really specific to BMX racing. It really is.